It was the joke heard around the world, the one by President Reagan about bombing the Soviet Union, and it resulted in a Soviet...
1984. The Cold War raged between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Major economic and political differences created a constant state of tension between the former allies. Capitalist United States experienced unprecedented economic growth. Apple released the highly anticipated Macintosh personal computer. Los Angeles hosted the 1984 Summer Olympics. Two major blockbusters hit theaters, Ghostbusters and Gremlins. Bruce Springsteen released his most successful record, Born in the USA. The nation grew and prospered, socially and economically. But the communist Soviet Union was a stark contrast. The economy was stagnant. The cost of oil, one of the country's leading exports, declined. The country boycotted the 1984 Summer Olympics, citing anti-Soviet hysteria. General Secretary Konstantin Chernenko was terminally ill. Mikhail Gorbachev waited in the wings. The country was 5 years into a conflict with Afghanistan. Citizens grew frustrated and had little money. The government enacted sweeping reforms to eradicate dissent and restore order. The two nations couldn't have been more divided. But that summer, a computer programmer in the Soviet Union created something special. It was a puzzle game that took the video game industry by storm and helped break the boundaries between the two superpowers.
Someone in the chat said, Russia created nothing. Stop spreading pro-Kremlin propaganda. Blasted save. Thank you for the 5. Get the subs. Yes, you're right. Tetris is not a Russian invention. You're
Alexei
right.
Leonidovich Pajitnov was born on March 14, 1956 in Moscow. His mother was a journalist who reported on cinema, a somewhat controversial art form in the Soviet Union. His father was a philosopher, a writer, and a dissident of the communist regime.
Wait, what? No, it wasn't. What the fuck? Dude, he did. What? Okay. I'm sure this is a very good, there's no way this is the, what? Okay. Soviet cinema is in a league of its own. And not only that, but the arts in general. This is like a classic Western capitalist take. Okay? A classic Western capitalist take is that the USSR was a joyless, gray, brutalist architecture-ridden, awful land full of starving people who were angry all the time and hated the fucking West. Brutalist architecture is true, okay? There's benefits to it. I'm not going to get into it. But as far as like the joylessness and the lack of art is so fucking insane. It is like a patently untrue ahistoric take, considering that Soviet cinema in and of itself is in a league of its own and is like internationally acclaimed. And not only that, but also as far as arts goes, like the USSR funded the fucking arts dramatically. Like this is something that they cared about. Education and the arts was profoundly important. That's crazy to just say that. That's crazy to just like, it's so insane that it's like hard for me to just glance past it. We're gonna move on, but just I need you to understand that that is objectively untrue. I mean, it's not even just like, yeah, here's George Lucas. Look.
But I do like movies. I love movies. And I know a lot of movies aren't popular. And you can say that going in. One of the reasons I retired is so I could make movies that aren't popular. Because in the world we live in the system we've created for ourselves in terms of it's a big industry, you cannot lose money. So the point is that you're forced to make a particular kind of movie. And I used to say this all the time when people, back when Russia was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers. They have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government. Otherwise, they can do anything they want.
And so what do you have to do?
You have to adhere to a very narrow line.
Yeah. He's literally saying, he's openly mentioning that you can have more freedom and you can have more creative liberties when you're not fucking constrained with the limitations that capitalism puts upon you. When it's government-funded art, as long as you do not criticize the government, or as long as you know how to toe the fucking line, you can get away with making insane shit, which is why a lot of USSR art, a lot of Soviet art was considered incredible. Meanwhile, all of our movies criticize the government, including Star Wars 1 through 3. No, you can still criticize, first of all, you can criticize governments as well. But he's still saying that those constraints are worse overall as far as like fielding art. Not all art has to like immediately be like, this sucks. Like the government is like shitting on, I hate the government and the government directly. Ultimately, revolutionary art or art that's critical of the government in and of itself, like American art, like Star Wars, okay, where George Lucas openly states he is claiming that the empire is the United States of America, okay, is still not pushing the needle as far as fucking, I don't know, building revolutionary optimism in anyone. Anyway.
Of commercialism. And there's only certain, look, when I started in the 70s, it was like this. You know, I could say Russia was like this, but we were like this. You could do a certain kind of movie. And I flaunted that system. I mean, THX, my first film, is definitely not an American film, and I shoved it in sideways. Francis helped me trick the studio.
Yeah, right.
They would have never let me make that movie if they knew what I was doing.
Yeah, he's saying that he had to dance within the constraints that were given to him. For example, whenever he talks about, one example of how political dimensions of Star Wars is that it's an allegory for how the Vietnamese resistance was able to defeat the U.S. empire, as George Lucas explains here. George Lucas talks about how Star Wars was also an allegory for how democracy turns into fascism, with the U.S. being the inspiration.
But I do like got abused.
Yeah, he talks about how Hollywood intentionally ignored the political dimensions of Star Wars and instead focused on commercializing its most banal parts as a franchise. He also argues that this destroying of creativity is an inherent part of capitalism. Anyway, just understand that this was a informative yet crazy fucking sidestep that we took away from the main point of contention here, Tetris.
When Pajitnov was 11, his parents divorced. From then on, he and his mother lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment. But their time together introduced him to pop culture. As a writer, his mother regularly attended the Moscow International Film Festival. Sometimes she brought young Alexei along and introduced him to films from around the world. He loved James Bond. He also loved math puzzles and board games, one of the few forms of entertainment available to children of the Soviet Union. One of his favorites was Pentominoes. The goal of the game is to arrange 12 unique puzzle pieces consisting of 5 blocks each into a rectangle. As a child in the 60s, Pajitnov witnessed the
This also is kind of funny because like China kind of does this too, where it's like they let you play games, but then you have to like watch museum videos and shit on social media. Obviously, they have like other fucking things to do as well, by the way. That part is ridiculous. But, you know, that level of control is something that you see in China as well, which, who knows, maybe it's not the worst idea.
Competition of space exploration between the United States and the Soviet Union. The USSR recruited scientists and engineers to give them an advantage. They hoped to draw children into the field by showing off the latest technology. As a result, 17-year-old Pajitnov was introduced to the computer. It left a lasting impression on him. He enrolled at the Moscow Institute of Aviation, where he earned his master's degree in applied mathematics. After graduating, Pajitnov joined the famous Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, where he landed a research position in the Dornitsyn Computing Center. But the computing center wasn't exactly at the forefront of technology. All employees used the same room-sized mainframe computer. Work conditions weren't ideal either. Pajitnov shared his desk with 3 other researchers. He followed the same routine almost every day. Wake up between 7:30 and 8 a.m., eat a breakfast of sausage, eggs, and cottage cheese, run some errands, then arrive at the computer.
I don't understand. Why wasn't he starving in abject poverty? As is the case for every Russian existing in the USSR. This is weird.
Computing center by 10 a.m. He
There was
worked
no
until
food.
midnight, which gave him some alone time in the evenings. Eventually, Pajitnov and a few other employees got an upgrade, their own personal Electronica 60 computer workstation. It was a huge upgrade over the giant mainframe computers, but to the rest of the modern world, it was ancient. The Electronica 60 was a clone of the LSI-11 computer, a system that came out 9 years prior. The display didn't show any graphics, only alphanumeric characters. Pajitnov worked on artificial intelligence programs and speech recognition software. The latter caught the attention of the KGB, Russia's head
Casually did not mention he became a computer scientist for free. Okay, well, that part is a given.
security agency. They hoped it could record phone conversations. But in the evenings, Pajitnov and a few other researchers had the computers to themselves to work on their own side projects. One programmer was obsessed with Pac-Man, one of the few arcade games to make its way past the Iron Curtain. He spent hours trying to reverse engineer it. There was also Dmitry Pavlovsky, a fellow researcher and friend who programmed several games on the giant mainframe computer stored away in the computing center. There was also a 16-year-old programming prodigy named Vadim Gerasimov. After impressing his computer science teacher, he was brought to the computing center to learn more about programming and assist with projects. Pavlovsky introduced Gerasimov to Alexei Pajitnov. The trio shared a love of computer games and programming, so they formed a team and brainstormed game ideas in the evenings. They hoped to package the games and possibly sell them, an extremely difficult endeavor in the Soviet Union. Pajitnov sat at his desk late into the night, brainstorming. He thought back to his childhood, when he spent hours playing pentominoes. Surely there was a way to translate this experience to the computer. Pajitnov made adjustments to the standard pentomino game to accommodate for his outdated hardware. He cut the 5-block shapes down to 4, which reduced the number of pieces from 12 to 7. In 6 days, Pajitnov completed his first version. He named it Genetic Engineering. The goal was simple: arrange the pieces until they fit into a box. It worked, but there was just one problem. It was boring. Once a player figured out the solution, they had no reason to play again. The game needed to challenge and engage the player. So Pajitnov made the game more hectic. He narrowed the playing field to the center.
It's literally one of the greatest games of all time, by the way. Like, still to this day. Such a basic concept, and yet so good.
Of the screen and had the pieces fall constantly. It was definitely more engaging and fast-paced, but that created a new problem. If you failed to complete a row, it's
Someone said I've never played. What the fuck? There are people on this planet that have never played Tetris. That's mind-boggling to me. I guess I'm old, like. You've never played Tetris? Like, I mean, I had a Game Boy, so like I fucking played a lot of Tetris, you know?
stayed on the screen. If you completed a row, it stayed on the screen too. It wasn't satisfying, and the game ended too quickly. Pajitnov's next modification made the game addictive. As soon as the player filled in an entire row, it disappeared. The game could potentially last forever, and fitting the puzzle pieces together was a satisfying reward. Suddenly, he couldn't stop playing his new game. He even played during work hours, claiming to be debugging software.
Yes, on the company
game was
dime.
naturally addictive and didn't require any sort of tutorial.
That is the Soviet way, okay? That's what Lenin would have wanted. That's certainly what Marx would have wanted. Truly, that is a revolutionary act, okay? Truly. Now, you know, revisionist pieces of shit might disagree with that, but ultimately, you know, the most revolutionary act you can engage in.
Or explanation. Pajitnov named the game Tetris, combining the Greek word tetra, meaning four, with his favorite sport, tennis. It had a basic scoring system, no sound, and no...
Which, by the way, remember, children had no games. Also, he was somehow a fan of tennis. I wonder why or how that happened. Because, again, a lot of value and a lot of emphasis placed on sports. Remember.
Extra levels. But it was addictive, and easily the best game in the trio's computer game package. But no one ever imagined Tetris would make it outside the halls of the Dordnitsin Computing Center. It only worked on the outdated Electronica 60 computer. Tetris gained a small cult following at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Pajitnov wanted to expand his audience, but the only way to do that was to program the game for a more commonly available platform, the IBM PC. He approached the 16-year-old whiz kid, Vadim Gerasimov, and asked if he could assist. It would be a somewhat difficult task. Gerasimov needed to rewrite the entire program on a computer he'd never used before. But in only a few days, Gerasimov had a working prototype. He had a fully functional, widely compatible version ready in a few weeks. He added color to the tetrominos, multiple levels, plus the ability to save your high score. Tetris was more addictive than ever before. However, the dream of selling their collection of games was falling apart. Starting a business, let alone a software business, was highly unusual in communist Soviet Union. Plus, they made Tetris at the Russian Academy of Sciences, which technically made the game government property. Pajitnov, Pavlovsky, and Gerasimov didn't want to see their hard work go to waste. They named their collection of games Computer Funfair and made copies, which they distributed to whoever was interested.
Wait. But the two things that he just said in succession literally don't... They do not go along with one another. On the one hand, he's saying... like, these guys wanted to make fucking money off of their IP. And on the other, he's saying that they gave it to everybody for free because they wanted everyone to enjoy it. And also, it is literally government property, government funded, made on the government dime. It makes perfect sense. Remember, guys, there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with the government doing this, especially when it comes to medicine.
One such person was Vladimir Pokilko, Alexei Pajitnov's friend and a clinical psychologist at the Moscow Medical Center. When he fired up Tetris at his workstation, he immediately recognized the addictive nature of the game. As rows of blocks disappeared, it gave the player an emotional high, fueling them to keep playing. Pokilko made copies of the game for his fellow employees. Soon, the entire psychology department...
One of the most important parts of this entire conversation that is going completely unnoticed, and it's one that I hope leftists are immediately trained to recognize, is one foundational principle that absolutely eviscerates every capitalist argument. Okay? The profit motive is later put into the conversation. He did not make this video game because he wanted to make profit. He made this video game because he was fucking bored and he wanted to make a video game. Because innovation is not only driven by profit, and that is still something that this person acknowledged as well. And that's something that people need to understand. But in America, in our hyper-capitalist dystopia, people only fucking think that innovation is driven by the profit motive. Okay? This dude, quite literally made something on public computers that the government paid for. He made a game because he was bored and he wanted to make a game. Okay, something to fill time with. He then turned around and gave it away for free. Don't lie, he was bored at work. I mean, it doesn't matter. There are so many different factors that play a role in innovation. It is never profit. If it was only profit, one of the greatest games of all time would not have been created in the USSR in ways that you just understood. Completely removed from the profit motive, okay? If that was the case, penicillin and insulin would not exist. Would love to hear this guy explain capitalism, explain how it'd be different or somehow good, like the workers made the game, had no ownership apart from their wages, which they received in overtime. Wait, what are you talking about? Oh, you're talking about... Yeah, you're talking about like if he was describing Ubisoft. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or any game for that matter that was developed by coders and developers and shit like that.
Was hooked. Pukilko feared the game would interfere with their work, so he destroyed every copy in the medical center. But the game found its way.
Wait, what?
Soon them to keep playing. Pukilko made copies of the game for his fellow employees. Soon the entire psychology department was hooked. Pukilko feared the game would interfere with their work, so he destroyed every copy in the medical center. But the game found its way back.
Yeah, see? You know, managerial dicks everywhere.
Rather than fight it, Pukilko thought the game could be useful in studying addiction. A unique two-player version was developed specifically for the Moscow Medical Center by Pajitnov and Gerasimov.
More publicly funded innovation. That's crazy.
By 1986, Tetris spread like wildfire throughout the Soviet Union. Almost anyone with access to an IBM PC had some form of the game. Pajitnov didn't make a penny, but he was excited about the popularity of the game. But it was only the beginning. Eventually, Tetris made its way outside the Soviet Union, which ignited an epic battle to cash in on the puzzle game.
I don't know, bro. You're kind of making it seem like capitalism is like bad or something. It kind of gave us everything we have. It's why you have your house law. Workers built this house, motherfucker. Not capitalists. Not a single fucking capital owner built this house. It was workers who built this house. Shut the fuck up. Anyway. I'm sure that guy was just joking.
With its simple and addictive gameplay mechanics, Tetris took over the free time of Soviet workers. One such person was Alexei Pajitnov's boss. He shared a copy with some colleagues at the SCKI Institute of Computer Science in Budapest, Hungary. They loved it.
Yeah, there's a lot of parts that are just like kind of being not talked about, like how the government saw this thing and recognized ingenuity, even with like how much bureaucratic red tape existed, even in the science area, right? Even at a time when the country is not like exactly doing well, and decided to further fund this guy's like passion project. There's no avenue where this can happen under a capitalist organization of the economy. It doesn't. You have to literally turn around and fucking make an argument as to how this will generate more value, generate more profits to the fucking company itself, who will then take the IP anyway. Notice how it is spreading before it can copy for free and be motivated to change it for the better.
Students at the Institute even ported the game to the Commodore 64 and Apple II, two popular home computers in the Western world. With that, Tetris officially crossed the Iron Curtain. In a sense, Hungary was the Western world's closest connection to Soviet life. It was under communist rule, but after the 1956 revolution, the Hungarian government passed major economic reforms to create a more open, free market. One of Hungary's most popular exports was the Rubik's Cube, created by Erno Rubik in 1974. Hungary was the place to go for business people looking to license Eastern products to Western audiences. One such businessman was Robert Stein, owner of the British software company Andromeda Software. After selling computer hardware in the 80s, Stein switched to a much more profitable business, selling software. But rather than look for potential new games in the UK...
Bro, this guy says, yes, the government funding, etc. is great, but weren't people suffering and dying from hunger in the meantime? You literally just missed the part of the video where the guy was talking about his fucking normal-ass diet. No, they weren't suffering from hunger in the meantime, dude. Also, like, also, what about people that are hungry right now? Like, dude, we live under a global capitalist organization of the economy, and 14 million die every year due to famine-related diseases and famine directly. Now, the worst part about it is that, like, if you consider Holodomor, okay, that's like, let's say that's partially deliberate, but partially mismanagement, and most importantly, it's like fucking failure of agricultural production. We don't have that anymore, and 14 million people die every fucking year. The only problem you need to solve, the only problem, is literally a matter of logistics. That's it. And we just don't want to solve it, because that would hurt the bottom line of agricultural producers. So it's like literally worse. It is objectively worse. It is also deliberate. It is perfectly deliberate. Anyway. Lol, try criticizing Soviet Russia without describing inner city Baltimore accidentally challenge. Yeah, every time. I mean, how many times do we have to go through this? It's like anytime someone talks about how fucking bad communism is or how bad socialism is, they end up describing capitalism, and it's mind-boggling to me. You're like, dude, socialism? Aren't you talking about the system where people are dying of hunger and like people are dying because they can't get like preventable diseases treated, or, you know, there's an accumulation of wealth and power at the top of and rampant corruption existing in government? I'm like, that's capitalism. You're describing America now. You're describing the United motherfucking States of America right now, today, in this very moment. Socialism is so bad. I heard they made the children that went to school literally do labor to pay for their fucking meals, dog. Oh, wait, that's not what's happening. That's happening right now in Philadelphia. That's crazy. Dude, I heard USSR is so bad about child labor that, like, they literally had to reinvent new ways of making child labor happen in the USSR because of the labor shortage. No, that's in America. That's Ohio. That's Minnesota. That's Arkansas. Today, right now, 2023. That's Iowa. Oh. It's not the same because communism makes us really mad. Anyway. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say the USSR was fucking, cheeky-breaky, okay? Or it was great. There were obviously bad parts of every fucking form of governance, and certainly the USSR made some mistakes overall. Not limited to Stalin. But, the idea that it's like, objectively evil, where America is a source of good, is so funny. When you got this article, dude, to save money, maybe you should skip breakfast, says the Wall Street Journal. People talk about the living conditions in the USSR. Meanwhile, like, look at the living condition next door, man. Like, look at outside of your immediate circle in your, like, Connecticut McMansion neighborhood. Motherfuckers will be saying, says you to me. But, like, at least I acknowledge it. I recognize it. I tell you that the top of the hour ad break is here. I tell you that you should skip breakfast and save the $5 specifically to avoid the top of the hour ad break. You know what I'm saying? These guys are trying to normalize saving money by skipping breakfast and eating less. I'm trying to normalize the top of the hour ad break and how punitive it may seem unless you're subscribed for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime, or if you're lucky enough to get gifted a sub. Here's the 3-minute ad break. Now, let's get back to the fucking Tetris video. Holy shit, I keep sidestepping so much.
Kay, he found his talent in his native country of Hungary. His business model was simple. Find a game, sell it to a publisher in the West, and collect royalties on the sales. Stein frequently visited the SZKI Institute of Computer Science for new titles, and in 1986...
Thank you, The Raging Hoppa, for the 10 gifted subs, allowing 10 people to no longer see the ads. Top of the hour.
He noticed someone playing a game in the corner of the computer lab. It was Tetris. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "Oh, it's just a game," an employee replied. Intrigued, Stein tried the game for himself. He wasn't a gamer, but he couldn't stop playing Tetris.
Prime, thank you for the 20
It was a surefire hit. He immediately went to the director of the institute and
Thank you,
inquired
Black
about
Kakarot.
licensing. But the
Thank you. We got medicalways.com for the 5 get the subs as well. This guy's 100% getting death threats for one of the most boring articles ever about egg, cereal, lettuce, juice, concentrate price increases year over year, month over month. That guy's editor completely fucked him. Anyway. Wasn't a gamer? Bro, no one was a gamer. I mean, yeah. Not a gamer sounds like Hasan.
director sheepishly admitted that the game wasn't theirs. If Stein wanted to license Tetris, he would have to make a deal with the Soviet Union. But that was easier said than done. Russia's economy was still very closed off. The chances of Stein simply flying to Moscow and brokering a deal was slim to none. But the director did have one line of communication. He had the number to the Russian Academy of Sciences telex machine. Stein sent a telex message stating that he wanted to acquire the rights to Tetris. The message was forwarded to the creator, Alexei Pajitnov. Pajitnov was shocked. He'd given up the idea of selling software. Now he had an offer in writing for the rights to Tetris, but he had to be cautious. He made Tetris, but he had—
By the way, Pajitnov openly talked about how he did not intend to make money from his creation, and he designed the game for fun. I just want people to understand that, because they keep there's a hammered in narrative. There's a hammered in narrative here, even here, when it's probably the closest you'll get to an objective assessment of the situation. And I even there, it's there's this idea that it's dude, he wanted to do it for profit. Not saying that he shouldn't profit. Okay. I don't have an issue with that. What I'm trying to state here is that ultimately this creation didn't come from the profit motive. Chat's so angry with America as they live high. Yeah, dude, it's fucking high living out here. Yeah, the only reason why America lives high is because America itself has objectively lowered the living standards of half the fucking global south. So yeah, in comparison to a country that we fucked over, yeah, we're in better shape. You know what I mean? Also,
he had no authority.
This conversation regularly avoids the entirety of Europe. The entirety of Europe is never called into question. Notice how every time we talk about America living high, we're always comparing America to America's victims, and we just never talk about Europe, where living conditions are objectively better. It's just we always forget that an entire continent of people that we didn't actually purposely eviscerate or destroy, but instead funneled money into and kind of made sure that they couldn't have any kind of socialism happening there, but still did not completely destroy their operations in the endless pursuit of extracting natural resources from. Those guys are doing better than we are. How is that possible? Question mark. You have to pay to use the restroom in Europe, little bro. What?
Movies. I love movies. And I know a lot of movies aren't popular.
That just started on its own. That was crazy. Anyway. Let's continue.
To negotiate for the rights to the game. We could do nothing for personal gain, he said. It would, however, be a huge accomplishment to have a game published. After several weeks of getting translations and the proper authorization, Pajitnov sent the following reply. Yes, we are interested. We would like to have this deal. For Pajitnov, it was a way of saying, let's talk more about this. He didn't want to commit for fear of discipline from his government, but he didn't want to shut the door either. But to Robert
Bro, this motherfucker just wanted people to play his game, dog. He wanted people to play his game.
Stein, it was a verbal agreement. As far as he knew, Andromeda Software could find a buyer for Tetris. Stein immediately went to one of his go-to publishers in the UK, Mirrorsoft. Mirrorsoft was the software division of the massive Maxwell Communications Corporation. Founded by Robert Maxwell, a decorated World War II veteran,
And father of Ghislaine Maxwell, an OG spy, okay? And father of, and I repeat, Ghislaine Maxwell, a spy for originally the OSS, which, by the way, that's what his decorated World War II veteran, that's what he's talking about. Yup.
and former member of parliament, the Maxwell Corporation owned several newspapers, magazines, and even a soccer club. Mirrorsoft was a big publisher with strong
Why
financial.
didn't you cover her trial? You can't be serious, right? Because I certainly did. What? Dude, where did these people come from, man? Where did these people come from? Where are you from? Like, not only did I cover the trial, I literally had famous journalist Brace Belden and Liz Franzik on the broadcast. And they were literally in the room. Like, they went and covered the broadcast. They went and covered the court case. In person, because they're reporters, they're journalists. Anyway, let's continue.
Financial backing. Stein set up a meeting with Mirrorsoft co-founder Jim McConnachie. He took a look at Tetris, thought nothing of it, and passed it off to Mirrorsoft's technical department. Several weeks later, McConnachie wandered down to the technical department during a lunch break and noticed everyone huddled around playing Tetris. He figured he should play the game himself. He took it home, and soon, McConnachie, his wife, and their children were hooked. Along with Mirrorsoft, Maxwell Corporation had another software company in the United States, Spectrum Holobyte. Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte worked well together, regularly sharing titles and publishing games in their respective regions. Spectrum Holobyte president Phil Adam was in the UK looking at new titles when McConnachie showed him Tetris. He too became addicted. From there, Robert Stein made a deal with the Maxwell Corporation. Mirrorsoft got the home computer and console rights to Tetris for the UK and Europe for £3,000 plus royalties. Spectrum Holobyte got the rights for the US and Japan for $11,000 plus royalties. It wasn't a huge payday for Stein, but he did have other rights to sell, including the arcade and handheld rights. The bigger problem,
Hungarian motherfuckers failing to do capitalism well.
however, was
Like, you can't even, dude, you want to be capitalist, but you can't even do capitalism. What are you doing? The real capitalists just fucking shellacked you, dude. They just fucked you so hard. Look what happened. Look at Hungary now. Always want to be something else, dude. Always. Can't fucking just be like, yeah, we're going to be Muslim. We're going to be Turks. Like, can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Gotta fucking act like you're something different. Oh, we're Christian. We're so different. Oh, we're capitalists. We love that shit. Yeah, good luck. Look how well that served you.
Stein's supposed deal with Pajitnov and the computing center in Moscow.
Just saying.
He had-
Betrayed. two hungry L's.
The vague telex message about making a deal, but nothing was signed. Technically, he was negotiating the rights to a game he didn't even own. With contracts pending with Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte, the clock was ticking. Stein sent off another telex message to Moscow with his offer. $10,000 up front, along with 75% on whatever money he made from Tetris. Pajitnov replied once again with a vague but positive response. They were ready to make a deal. Stein kept pressing. He even offered partial payment in the form of Commodore computers. But just as Pajitnov predicted, the Soviet regime intervened in the negotiations. AcademySoft, an internal publishing and licensing group within the Russian Academy of Sciences, handled further negotiations. AcademySoft insisted that the only rights available to Stein were for the IBM PC version of Tetris. Stein agreed. Future versions of Tetris could be negotiated for later. It was now 1987, and there were still no signed contracts. Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft prepared their versions of Tetris under the assumption that all the rights were secured. Robert Stein grew frustrated. Who exactly was in charge of the negotiations on the Russian side? Stein had a verbal agreement, or so he thought, but he needed pen to paper in order to make his dealings with Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte legit. So Stein put pressure on the Russians. In April of 1987, he sent another telex message to Moscow, this time announcing that Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte would release Tetris for the IBM PC in their respective regions. But his forcefulness got him nowhere. In June of 1987, Stein finalized the deals with Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft for Tetris. But he still had to get the Russians to sign on the dotted line. Robert Stein assured Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft that he would secure a deal with the Russians, so the two companies moved forward with Tetris. But marketing was a big issue. Tetris was an addictive game, but it was unlike any other game on the market. There was no story or hero. The graphics weren't cutting edge. Phil Adam, president of Spectrum Holobyte, noted that Tetris was the first Russian game to be commercialized in North America. Why not use this to their advantage? He proposed Tetris be marketed as an exotic game from the mysterious world behind the Iron Curtain. It would surely tap into the public's curiosity about the Soviet Union. The game was completely reprogrammed to incorporate allusions to Russia. The developers added imagery of St. Basil's Cathedral, Lenin Stadium, and May Day celebrations in Red Square. They incorporated classical Russian music. They even added a reference to Matthias Rust, a West German pilot who flew a small plane directly into Red Square. He was arrested and charged with hooliganism. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev,
just important pieces of USSR history, including that.
impersonators showed off the game at trade shows. The Tetris hype grew as release day approached. But right before Tetris launched, in January of 1988, Robert Stein received a telex message from another organization in Russia. The group accused Stein of selling Tetris illegally and demanded that further negotiations go through them. They were known as ELORG. ELORG was short for Electronic Org Technica. The Soviet Ministry of Foreign Trade formed ELORG for the purpose of importing and exporting technology, specifically to other communist nations. But in the 1980s, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, restrictions on foreign trade with the West loosened. ELORG was now free to seek licensing deals for technology internationally. This included computer software. ELORG learned that some of the researchers at the Russian Academy of Sciences were creating computer programs, including Pajitnov's artificial intelligence software.
Like, here's the thing. Like, if you look at this from a pro-capitalist point of view, you can't literally look to one of the most formative, one of the most important fucking video game inventions, one of the most, still to this day, playable video games that is arguably, very successful as IP, standalone IP, and say, oh, it's okay that a Hungarian guy that, imported it under, weird loopholes, imported it for $11,000 and say that that's fair is fair. You know what I mean? So, the Russian government at that point, the USSR, wanting more for this IP, if you are going to look at it through capitalist standards, it's literally just combating exploitation. British guy through a Hungarian guy. You know what I mean? It's it makes sense even from a capitalist perspective.
Elorg met with Pajitnov to see if the program could be sold internationally. During the meeting, Pajitnov casually mentioned Tetris and how he and AcademySoft had trouble getting a licensing deal with Robert Stein. Representatives from Elorg were shocked. Pajitnov and AcademySoft had no authority to negotiate international software licensing deals. They demanded all the paperwork be handed over immediately. What they learned was incredible. A researcher at the Russian Academy of Sciences was negotiating an international business deal for a video game. Not only that, but it was about to be sold in the West, and nothing had been signed. From that point on, Elorg was in charge of all negotiations for Tetris. They asked Robert Stein to come to Moscow to explain himself. When he arrived, Stein said it felt like an interrogation. Representatives from Elorg didn't trust him. "Why are you selling Tetris without our permission?" they asked. "I didn't even know your group existed," Stein replied. He held his ground, arguing that pulling the deal now—
I don't even disagree, by the way. I'm sure, like, to be fair, like, that seems like a bureaucratic incompetence, certainly, for sure. No, look, I'm not gonna, like, fucking defend the guy here, okay? I'm not gonna defend the guy here, but what Elorg is doing in this situation is like what every fucking IP owner does. So, you know, I don't even disagree with Robert Stein.
could be an embarrassment to the USSR, as it would make them seem unreliable in the world economy. The two sides went back and forth in what seemed like a never-ending game of tennis. Elorg wanted final approval over any of the games. Stein wanted the rights to all home computer systems, not just the IBM PC. The two sides continued to negotiate. Nothing had been signed. But in the West, Tetris moved forward. On January 29, 1988, Spectrum Holobyte released Tetris for $34.95. It came in a red box with the word Tetris written in Russian in bold yellow characters. It stood out from the other games. The Russian marketing angle worked brilliantly. Spectrum Holobyte sold 100,000 copies in the first year.
Jesus
in the UK,
Christ.
Mirrorsoft sold fewer, but still a sizable amount. Then again, they also removed a lot of the Russian imagery from their version. The reviews were glowing.
Tetris is so simple to learn that you'll know all the rules 5 minutes after opening the box. But it's so intriguing to play that
This is why, like, cryptocurrency scams are just a microcosm of the kind of shellacking and a kind of ass fucking that happens under capitalism regularly. Guy makes a game because he wants to have fun. He wants to just spread it, okay? He's like, this is fire. I think I got something dope here. I want everyone to be able to play it, okay? Then, through two different protocols, two separate layers of people get ass fucked up the capital extraction line, ultimately with like the corporation that finally ends up with the IP just selling it for $34.99. Okay. Meanwhile, the USSR is still trying to. Fucking at this stage make more money, demand more money off of the IP that like these people got through illicit means.
that once you've started, you'll be spending many hours in front of the computer screen, so many that you'll begin to wonder if Tetris isn't really part of a diabolical plot, hatched in the evil empire to lower worker productivity in the United States. Dennis Lynch, Chicago Tribune.
As computer games go, it is simple and addictive. Critics say it lacks the guns and explosions and mayhem that appeal to young connoisseurs of American entertainment software. But then, Soviet software is apparently softline. Peter Lewis, The New York Times.
Tetris fever enveloped the West and was being played at home and at work. Spectrum Holobyte even added a boss key to the game. Pressing the escape button would quickly bring up a blank command prompt. To Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft, it was a resounding success. But Robert Stein was nervous. His deal with the Russians was still in limbo. Spectrum Holobyte and Mirrorsoft began porting the game to other computer platforms. But finally, in May of 1988, 4 months after Tetris hit the market, Elorg and Robert Stein made a deal. Andromeda Software got the rights to Tetris for home computer systems. They also got the rights to port Tetris to, quote, different types of computers. To Stein, this meant home consoles as well. Elorg received an undisclosed amount up front, as well as royalties on every game sold. Stein breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly phoned Jim McConaughey at Microsoft, confirming the deal was officially done. When McConaughey asked about the arcade and handheld rights, Stein assured him that deal was imminent as well. From there, they wove a tangled web of sublicenses that would ultimately turn into a ferocious battle over who could do what.
You were just on a sign at the All-Star game. Giannis just said he likes you more than Hasan Minhaj. Sorry, off topic, but just saw it. There is 0% chance that what this guy is saying is real. Like, what? I don't even understand what the fuck he's talking about. What is the All-Star game? What a weird thing to make up. The NBA All-Star game is happening right now? Not. All-Star NBA weekend just started. Yeah, no. I doubt it. I doubt that someone went to the NBA All-Star game. They have Hasan Minhaj on one side and you on the other. What? What the fuck? What do you mean? He likely fell asleep on the couch and watching it and dreamed it. Yeah. Giannis is Greek. He doesn't know you. Oh my God. Everyone is immediately like, dude, you have to. It's real, bro. I got it, man. It's a poop sock. You want me to click it that desperately? All right. Anyway. Okay. We're going to get back to Tetris.
What with Tetris?
Okay, if it's on ESPN right now, clip it and ship it.
In January of 1988, Spectrum Holobyte showed off their new product at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Spectrum Holobyte president Phil Adams stood proudly on the showroom floor, displaying Tetris to a long line of attendees. Standing in that line was Hank Rogers, owner
Hasan
of Japanese
Minhaj is
game
at the
publisher
NBA
Bulletproof
All-Star
Software.
Celebrity Game.
Rogers was born in the Netherlands, but grew up in the United States. While in college at the University of Hawaii,
Hasan Minhaj getting bullied by Giannis. I love Giannis now.
To see you now under pressure. Yeah, 20,000 people. Boo! Yeah, no, you're not. Hey, turn the other way. Turn it around. Turn it. I like him better.
Yeah, that's not me, bro. What the fuck? That was what the chatter was talking about? That's pretty funny. Chatter thought that was me? Big name Asian icons will be participating as Hasan Minhaj, Indian American comedian Ranveer Singh Bhavnavi, and oh, by the way, I've played with big homie Simu over here, and he is actually very good. I don't know how good Hasan is, but he's actually pretty decent. I think this is the photos they showed on TV. The other guy does kind of look like you. Yeah, no, that's not me, man. Why have you played ball with Simu? Yeah, there is no, that's not me. Chatter got so excited. No, but this is what they mean. You got debated. Oh, this is insane. Okay, we're getting sidetracked, but this is insane. I gotta show this to you. I saw this earlier. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. It's fake, right? It's fake, right? No shot, it's real. There's no way. It seems fake. Oh yeah, the Simu thing wasn't fake. Yeah. Bro, I did turn to my friend and after the run was like, have I seen Hasan somewhere before? Like, do we know him? And he looked at me like it was a total fucking idiot. So great balling with you, haha. No shot. Boots on alt. Tell us about Ball with Earl Sweatshirt. I haven't seen him since. Okay, let's get back to this fucking video. Oh my god, I'm so annoyed. I keep getting sidetracked.
Hawaii, he fell in love with a Japanese woman and moved back to Japan with her. From there, he got into game development and formed Bulletproof Software. Inspired by the game Dungeons & Dragons, Hank Rogers released The Black Onyx, an ambitious, turn-based RPG, the likes of which Japan had never seen before. By the end of 1984, it was the best-selling computer game in Japan. In 1985, he was enamored with the Nintendo Famicom and determined to make a game for the system. After reading in a magazine that Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi was a fan of the board game Go, he set up a meeting. Rogers pitched that he could make Go for the Famicom. Yamauchi gave him an advance of 30 million yen, or approximately $300,000, to make the game. Within minutes, Rogers had a deal with Nintendo, cash, and became an official Nintendo licensee. By 1988, Rogers was getting more into publishing. He frequented trade shows, looking for the next big game to bring back to Japan. So there he stood, waiting in line to play an odd-looking new game from Russia, Tetris. He wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Tetris was probably the quietest game at the show. Even then, products were graphically exciting, but this game was a totally different thing. I wanted to play it because it struck some basic chord. I couldn't stop playing. After going through the line more than 5 times to play, Rogers was convinced. Tetris was the game he was looking for. It was simple, seemed easy to program, and would require little translation. Rogers learned that Gilman Louie, CEO of Spectrum Holobyte, was going to Japan to shop the game. Gilman Louie's first stop was the ASCII Corporation, one of the largest publishers in Japan. They declined Tetris, saying it was too retro. Their loss was Rogers' gain. Gilman Louie and Hank Rogers signed a letter of intent for Bulletproof Software to publish Tetris in Japan for just about every platform.
It's so funny that even on this fucking platform, of all platforms, people still do like ASCII. You still turn around and go, ASCII, Lamau. Like, you know the word. Like, we don't even allow it in the fucking chat. And you still go, Lamau, ASCII.
Form imaginable. Rogers' offer was standard, a cash advance, as well as royalties on every copy sold. Spectrum Holobyte had no plans for getting into the Japanese market, and Rogers seemed more than capable of delivering Tetris to the country. When Gilman Louie phoned Jim McConaughey at Mirrorsoft to tell him the news, he received a surprise. Rogers couldn't have the console and arcade rights for Japan because those were already sold. The buyer was Atari Games, which planned to publish the games under their subsidiary, Tengen. Like everyone else, engineers at Atari Games were playing the PC version of Tetris and were addicted. It became common water cooler talk at the office, which motivated Atari Games to grab the rights. To make matters worse for Rogers, Atari Games got it for a steal. In exchange for console and arcade rights in Japan and North America, Atari Games gave Mirrorsoft the PC rights to Blasteroids, a shallow update of the arcade game Asteroids. No royalties or cash to consider. Gilman Louie was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Mirrorsoft had more power thanks to their direct connection to the Maxwell Corporation. Louie phoned Hank Rogers to give him the news. Rogers could have the PC rights, but if he wanted the console and arcade rights, he would have to contact Atari Games. When Rogers contacted them and inquired about the rights, Atari Games declined. Undeterred, Rogers flew to California and camped out in the Atari Games parking lot. He waited for an opportunity to talk to their president, Hideyuki Nakajima. As Nakajima was leaving for the day,
I just want to point out one thing and one thing only. Not a single piece of this invention was fundamentally changed, and yet millions of dollars have exchanged hands at this point. And ultimately, when it was inside of the borders of the USSR, it was just, freely distributed, given to people for fun times. And it is such a perfect demonstration. It is such a perfect example. Not a single piece of what makes the game so brilliant, so unique, so replayable has changed at all. They added a little bit of fucking ticker tape. They added a little bit of seasoning on top of it, and millions and millions of dollars of exchange hands so far with no fundamental differences to what makes the game unique. Don't ever talk to me about how capitalism is innovative ever again, okay? It is just an entire fucking sea of middle managers trying to generate value as they move the same product up the fucking food chain and all the way down back to the food chain. Capitalism's only innovation is creating new profit centers, sorry.
Rogers swooped in and made his sales pitch. Eventually, Nakajima agreed to a meeting. Over a sushi dinner, the two businessmen hashed out the details. Nakajima couldn't sell the arcade rights. He had already sold them to Sega, but he was willing to sell the console rights in Japan. Nakajima didn't care too much about having the console rights in Japan because he was focusing on the North American market. The price tag was steep. Rogers had to cough up $300,000 for the console rights, but he was confident the game was a hit. However, initial sales in Japan were low. Bulletproof Software only received 40,000 orders. Rogers contacted Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi in hopes that he could help push the game. Yamauchi was curious, so he passed Tetris down to one of his designers, Shigeru Miyamoto. Several days later, Yamauchi asked Miyamoto if Tetris was a good game. "Yes," replied Miyamoto. When Yamauchi asked why, Miyamoto responded, "Because your secretaries and accountants are playing it." With that, Yamauchi understood Tetris's universal appeal, and he agreed to help push sales of Tetris. Orders increased from 40,000 to over 200,000. On December 22, 1988, Bulletproof Software released Tetris for the Nintendo Famicom, where it became their best-selling game of all time, selling 2 million copies. But it added yet another branch to a complicated tree of licensing and sub-licensing. Everything hinged on one contract, Robert Stein's deal with the Russians at Elorg. And that deal was in jeopardy.
Yeah. It's just literally the game has not fundamentally changed at this point. The guy who made it just wants to have fun, just wants other people to have fun. The Russian government's like, okay, well, if you guys are making money off of it, let's get some of that back, okay? Meanwhile, it's just layers upon layers of distribution rights that these people are fighting on, okay? Tell me which part of that is where capitalists are doing a good job. It's just a bunch of fucking ruthless vultures every step of the way trying to get a piece of the fucking pie.
In 1988, Nintendo was on top of the video game world. They were on pace to sell 7 million Nintendo. And
by the way, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I need everyone to understand something, okay? There are a couple fundamental principles that just remain true in this story, and it's a perfect demonstration of said principles. Okay, number one, the thing that fosters innovation is not the profit incentive, is not the profit motive, contrary to popular opinion. Okay, there are plenty of instances where like innovation has come not as a consequence of profit motive, but because people just either wanted to cure boredom or wanted fucking to cure an illness. Okay, so that is really, really, really important. Okay, that's something that I hope everyone understands. Number two, as far as innovation goes, also you can do it via public funding. Okay, without the profit motive in mind. This and a litany of even things that were created in the West under public research, publicly funded research, is proof of this as well. And three, and perhaps this is more important for contemporary society here, the only thing that capitalist corporations added onto this was nothing that was like a fundamental difference or whatever, but just packaging, okay? Marketing. Capitalism is very good at marketing, okay? It created a way to market, and that's the only additional value that it provided. Other than that, it's just like distribution, but most importantly, it's just literally changing the delivery mechanism and marketing. Why do I hyper-focus on these two elements here? Because that is precisely what happens in medicine every fucking day, okay? This is something that I personally despise. I talk about regularly. Medicine, okay, pharmaceuticals have inelastic demand. So even by capitalist metrics, even by a neoclassical economist understanding of the subject matter, pharmaceuticals need to be heavily regulated, if not entirely nationalized. Okay? What do pharmaceutical corporations do? They do this exact same thing that they did with Tetris. Now, Tetris, of course, is a consumer good. It's not medicine. You will not die if you don't have Tetris. Make matters worse, you will die if you don't have the actual medication. And yet, here in the United States of America, that's all pharmaceutical corporations do. They fucking hound. They engage in the most predatory hounding of patents and basically try to extend patents as long as they possibly can through different delivery mechanisms. All they will change is just like one way to deliver the same exact medicine, just so they can continue extending the fucking lifeline, continue extending the patent itself. Not only that, but also when patents are slated to end, okay, when the lifespan of a patent is about to end, pharmaceutical corporations will stop actually trying to find new ways and stop trying to test new ways in which medication that they already have on hand could solve other illnesses. So misinformed. Yeah, you're right. Well, I described everything that is currently happening in, capitalist medicine, but one chatter said I'm so misinformed. So clearly, he will now begin to explain to me how novel chemical compounds are actually found in the United States, or a lot of novel chemical compounds are found in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, the United States of America is number one in novel chemical compound discovery, except that, of course, completely fails to recognize the size of the United States and also how much of the novel chemical compound discovery is actually still funded and facilitated by publicly funded research. And not only that, but also as far as like the per capita argument goes, the United States does not crack the top 5 of novel chemical compound discovery in the field of medicine. I am not actually misinformed. I also know what your counters are going to be, and your counters are wrong. Unless you have something else to explain to me, like a Steven Crowder video that you watch that says that like the United States of America actually funds the rest of the world's medication because we're so magnanimous and so good by paying 10 times the price for fucking insulin that we would if we crossed the border of Mexico or snow Mexico up in the north, i.e. Canada, then I will tell you that you're completely incorrect, and I can address that as well. Do you want me to give you more fucking examples that your side constantly makes? Because I've heard it a million times over. It's just not real. It's not real. It's just complete fabrication. The American Enterprise Institute wrote it up in like 1985, and they still use the same exact dumbass fucking arguments still to this day. Oh. He just said so misinformed. That's it. Come on, man. Give me something. Anything. What happened? Did you say so misinformed and die of an aneurysm? Insulin was discovered by 2 snow Mexicans. Don't forget it. Yep. Part of my job is looking at pharmaceutical R&D. Companies literally take the same drug and recycle it through development for what it seems like an insignificant change to refresh and hold their IP. Yes. It's IP and marketing. That's all. It's the new delivery mechanisms that they focus on to extend their IP or marketing. That's it. And lobbying, of course, too. I just want to hear what this guy has. He might have something.
Entertainment systems that year. Industry experts predicted the market for Nintendo games was larger than all home computer software. And they weren't done yet. Waiting in the wings at Nintendo of Japan was a new system, the handheld Game Boy. In North America, it was standard to package new Nintendo consoles with a game. But which one? In December of 1988, Hank Rogers was meeting with Nintendo of America president Minoru Arakawa at their headquarters in Redmond, Washington. When Rogers heard about their situation, he suggested Tetris. If you include Mario, the Game Boy will be for little boys. But if you include Tetris, the Game Boy will be for everybody, he said. Arakawa was intrigued. He heard about the success of Tetris for the Famicom in Japan. Tengen was preparing to release Tetris for the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America, but the handheld rights were still up for grabs. Rogers was more than happy to help. He knew he could make millions in this deal, especially if Tetris was a pack-in title. After his experience getting the Tetris rights in Japan, he knew that Robert Stein was the man to talk to. Rogers called Stein and inquired about the handheld rights to Tetris. He offered $25,000 in advance. Stein, who still didn't have the handheld or arcade rights, was also fielding calls from Mirrorsoft asking for the handheld rights. He was wishy-washy in his response. He would have to check with the Russians and get back to Rogers. But Stein was about to hit another roadblock. Somewhere in the tangled web of licensing, Elorg wasn't getting paid. They tasked their new director, Nikolai Belikov, with sorting out the mess. Belikov was a large man with a reputation for being cutthroat. Pajitnov described him as an excellent actor. He was a worthy negotiator. Belikov read Stein and Elorg's contract, which was signed in May of 1988. It promised payment within 3 months. The payment was now 3 months overdue.
Man, that's crazy. They're making millions and millions and millions of dollars off this fucking IP at this point, and they haven't given a single dime to the USSR. That's wild.
Stein was stuck. He had Mirrorsoft and Hank Rogers wanting handheld rights. Unlicensed arcade versions of Tetris were already being sold. He figured his best chance to sort everything out was to fly to Moscow and meet with Belikov. Meanwhile, Hank Rogers felt ignored. He grew suspicious of Robert Stein. Not only that, but he got word that Gilman Louie of Spectrum Holobyte was trying to sell the handheld rights for Tetris to Nintendo. When Minoru Arakawa asked Rogers about it, Rogers was adamant. "I know Gilman doesn't have those rights. Give me a chance to finalize that deal." Rogers decided that it would be easier if he just dealt with the Russians himself, and headed off to Moscow. In the UK, Mirrorsoft caught wind of Nintendo's interest in handheld rights. Parent company Maxwell Corporation sent Kevin Maxwell, the son of owner Robert Maxwell, to Moscow.
And Ghislaine Maxwell's brother. Dude, it's like the best parts of the story are like this, okay? USSR, Pajitnov's like, childhood, what made him create Tetris, and then every other part of it has just been like the actual bureaucratic. Are you serious when you keep saying that? Yes, bro. Yes. That's not a joke. What the fuck? No, I'm not joking. Robert Maxwell is Ghislaine Maxwell's father. What the fuck? Like Jeffrey Epstein's Ghislaine Maxwell. Yes. They already mentioned it. Robert Maxwell, OSS agent, decorated World War II veteran. Robert Maxwell, who, owns fucking, what do you call it? Like a bunch of newspapers? Yeah.
Moscow. Maxwell Corporation had connections with Russian diplomats
and
would
CIA
have much
and
more
Mossad.
power securing the handheld and arcade rights. In February of 1989, all three men, Stein, Rogers, and Maxwell, flew to Moscow to get their piece of the Tetris pie. The battle for Tetris was about to begin.
Ghislaine Maxwell's a Nepo baby? Yes. Yeah. That's why the international pedophile sex traffickers have fallen off. They're hiring nepotism talent. They're not going into the fucking roster any longer like they used to back in the day. You know what I mean? Oh, Jesus. Okay, let's continue. Sorry.
Hank Rogers arrived in Moscow without any clue where to go. He knew Stein was negotiating with Elorg, but he had trouble finding their whereabouts. At first, he tried to make friends by playing Go with some locals, but that got him nowhere. So Rogers hired an interpreter to help him find Elorg. After a day of riding around Moscow, they finally got the location. Hank Rogers walked into Elorg and asked to speak to someone about the rights to Tetris. As he waited in the lobby...
Wait. The other guy that was trying to fucking sell this, Gilman Louis? Oh my God. The other guy that was trying to sell the rights and sidestep the other dude is also the guy who founded In-Q-Tel. Oh my God. The CIA had everything to do with Tetris being sold globally from both fronts. That's insane. Oh my God. Oh my God. For those of you who don't know, In-Q-Tel is the CIA venture capital fund. Okay. It is a multiple billion-dollar for-profit venture capital firm based in Arlington, Virginia. It invests in high-tech companies to keep the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies equipped with the latest information technology. Some of their funding includes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Google Maps. Right? Yeah, In-Q-Tel sold 5,636 shares of Google worth over $2.2 million in November 15, 2005. The shares were a result of Google's acquisition of Keyhole, Inc., the CIA-funded satellite mapping software now known as Google Earth. It's the CIA's investment division. What the fuck? This led to Google Earth? Yes, the CIA-funded satellite mapping software is now known as Google Earth. Keyhole, Inc. Maybe the CIA thought, perhaps not so incorrectly, that video games would be as addictive as another venture that the CIA engages in now, opium, at the time, and that's why they were funding it? I don't fucking know. Probably not. Holy shit, they invented GeoGuessr. Michael! M. HUD. Was In-Q-Tel around before 1999? No. I mean, not officially, at least. It is wild, though, that this fucking dude who was a video game designer, co-founded and ran the CIA venture capital In-Q-Tel. With his company, Nexa Corporation, to design and develop multiple computer games such as the F-16 Fighting Falcon Flight Simulator series. It later merged with Spectrum Holobyte, where he was the CEO until its acquisition by Hasbro, after which he became the chief creative officer and general manager of Games.com Group. Like, why? Why is he doing that? Look at the Intercept link. Oh, they wrote a piece on Gilman this week. White House-linked venture capital fund boasts China war would be great for business. Nice. A representative from America's Frontier Fund said that a kinetic event in the Pacific would be very good for its bottom line. That's the same guy that we're talking about, by the way. Gilman Louie, American Frontier Fund's co-founder and CEO. Following the panel discussion, Tom spoke with a gaggle of other attendees and held forth AFF's investment in so-called choke point sectors that would spike in value during a volatile geopolitical crisis, like computer chips or rare earth minerals. It turns out, according to the audio published by Polson, that a war in the Pacific would be tremendous for AFF's bottom line. If the China-Taiwan situation happens, some of our investments will 10x like overnight, the person who identified as Tom said. So I don't want to share the name, but the one example I gave was critical component that the total market value is $200 million, but it is a critical component to a $50 billion market cap. That's like a choke point, right? And so if it's only produced in China, for example, and there's a kinetic event in the Pacific, that would 10x overnight, like no question about it. There's a couple different things like that. AFF is surely not the only venture fund that would see the stratospheric returns throughout their portfolio in the case of destabilizing global crisis, like a kinetic event in the Pacific, that is to say, war. Unlike most other investment firms, though, AFF is closely tied to the upper echelons of American power, the very people who would craft any response to such a war. Gilman Louie, AFF's co-founder and current CEO, serves as the chair of the National Intelligence University, advises Biden through his Intelligence Advisory Board, and was tapped for the State Department's Foreign Affairs Policy Board by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in 2022. Louie previously ran In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm, like we just talked about. It is fucking bananas how, like, we were watching a random goddamn video from a YouTuber about how Tetris was sold to capitalists from the, and that story led to, well, actually, technically, we watched an Apple trailer, an Apple Plus trailer that greatly mythologized and put a Western capitalist at the fucking forefront of, like, selling Tetris as this IP that the creator always wanted to sell, but the USSR was like scarily stopping him from doing so, into a 59-minute video that basically details that that was not the case, and that the Western capitals were just stealing the fucking IP without like giving anything back to the USSR. That and bits and pieces have shown not one but two different spooks, one for the CIA and the other for both the CIA as well, Mossad, and also the British intelligence. What is it, MI5? Is it MI6 or MI5? I don't fucking know. Whatever, who cares? It's the UK. Major L for them. Anyway, Robert Maxwell, MI6.
He could feel the tension. You don't walk into a place like that uninvited, he said. When Belikov was told a foreigner from Japan had come to discuss Tetris, he was surprised. It was against government protocol to meet with foreigners without proper clearance. But Belikov was curious and decided to meet him. If nothing else, having a third bidder for Tetris would help in his negotiations. Belikov met Rogers in the lobby. "Who are you?" he asked. Rogers took out a copy of Tetris on the Famicom and handed it to Belikov. "We are the biggest publisher of Tetris in the world right now," he boasted. Belikov looked at the game, confused. As far as he knew, no one had the console rights to Tetris. "Elorg hasn't given video game console rights to anyone," Belikov barked. Rogers made his case, explaining the chain of licensing and sub-licensing that gave him the rights. Elorg, to Andromeda, to Mirrorsoft, to Tengen, to Bullet...
Dude, come on. You can't look at this and be like, wow, capitalism, so innovative.
...proof software. Belikov was confused. He had never even heard of Tengen. The only rights were transferred to Andromeda Software, and only for using Tetris on personal computers. You are illegally...
And even he didn't get... They didn't even get the money for that.
...selling something that doesn't belong to you, he said. Rogers had come to Moscow to secure the handheld rights, but now he was in danger of losing everything. Either I'm going to come out of here with the rights to Tetris, or I'm going to be in some gulag, he thought. After some discussion, Rogers and Belikov set up a meeting for the next day. The next day, Hank Rogers arrived at Elorg and was ushered into a large room with a massive table. On one end of the table was Elorg's negotiator Nikolai Belikov, Tetris creator Alexei Pajitnov, and several members of the Elorg team. Hank Rogers sat alone on the other side. Usually his sales pitches touched on his close connection with Nintendo and how they had a majority of the video game market share. But the Russians didn't know anything about Nintendo or the video game market. So he shifted gears and gave them a crash course on the video game business. Elorg showed Rogers their original contract with Robert Stein of Andromeda Software. Rogers scanned it and found the line that was causing all the trouble.
What gulags were there in the late 80s? Okay, dude, it's like the same. Listen, it's only a work camp or a workers' prison or a gulag if it's in Russia. If it's literally state-sponsored slavery in the form of like, slave labor in our prison system, that's different, okay? You have to understand. In the 80s, like the gulag in the way that you understand it does not exist. In the 80s in America, plantations in the way that you understand it still existed, by the way, but gulag in the way that you understand it did not. But it doesn't matter because now it's like you're still running off the old shit.
Contract between Andromeda Software and Elorg stated that Stein had the rights to port Tetris to, quote, different types of computers. To the Russians, this meant exactly that, computer systems. To Stein, the distinction between computer system and console didn't exist. On top of that, Elorg was making pennies on Tetris.
It's really funny that, like, on the one hand, Russians are not aware of Nintendo, right? He's saying Russians don't even know what Nintendo is. On the other hand, they're clearly aware of a distinction between personal computers and consoles. Meanwhile, Stein, who literally sells video games to consoles, okay, to platforms, is like acting like there is no distinction between PC and consoles. It's crazy. I'm just surprised that the Soviets had no understanding of what Nintendo is, but they also still absolutely understand the distinction between PC and console, personal computers and consoles.
A percent of a percent. It was a horrible contract. Rogers made his case to Elorg, explaining his offer for handheld rights in detail. He offered a fixed amount for each cartridge sold. It was a nice change of pace after dealing with Robert Stein. Pajitnov in particular was impressed. Rogers understood the business end of things, but as a former developer, the two were kindred spirits. After Rogers' pitch, Belikov wanted to move forward and asked for a formal offer for handheld rights to Tetris. Write everything down, he said. Belikov then asked Rogers when he would be back in Moscow. Either I leave with the deal or without the deal. I'm not coming back, Rogers replied. After the meeting, Hank Rogers and Alexei Pajitnov continued talking. Somehow we liked each other almost immediately. He was the friend I was looking for in Russia, said Rogers. That night, Pajitnov showed Rogers around Moscow. They explored the city, drank vodka, and discussed ideas for a sequel to Tetris. For Pajitnov, it was refreshing to have a casual conversation about his creation. He offered me nothing and asked for nothing, he said. The two formed a friendship that would
Poor guy, you got duped, brother. What do you mean? This guy just fucking wined and dined you. He's a snake oil salesman, homie. What do you mean? He wined and dined you. He's like, oh, he just didn't ask for anything. It's like, yeah, he literally just took your creation. Like, he literally went there to get international distribution rights to your creation.
Would have a major impact on the future of Tetris. The next day, Rogers returned to Elorg with a one-page offer for the handheld rights to Tetris. Rogers knew Stein would be coming, so he added pressure by having the offer expire in 1 week. After his crash course on the video game business, Nikolai Belikov prepared for his upcoming meetings with Robert Stein and Kevin Maxwell. Belikov thought Stein was abusing his rights to Tetris. Stein reaped all the rewards, while the Russians got next to nothing. It was also apparent that Tetris creator Alexei Pajitnov preferred Rogers over Stein. It was time for the communists to play the game of capitalism. Robert Stein entered the Elorg offices with one goal in mind: to secure the handheld and arcade rights to Tetris. The arcade rights were especially important, considering Tengen and Sega were already selling machines.
A similar thing always happens when Western nations, America, Western media specifically, covers China. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. On the one hand, they're like, oh, look at these fucking dumbass communists. Like, they're making fucking video games and they're making IP without having like a serious patent over it. And they're just like releasing it for no fucking reason. Let's make money over it. So when they're like, okay, well, this is our IP. We are now like literally, and I use this term very liberally, democratizing their marketplace. That is the Western liberal take on, on this era of the USSR. If they are democratizing their marketplace and focusing on international trade, then they're like, lol, you're just trying to make money. It seems like you're a capitalist. And this is something that you see about, this is something that they talk about with China too, all the fucking time. The media covered China relentlessly. They were like, oh my God, their COVID-0 policies are killing people. Oh my God, their COVID-0 policies are killing people. They're like directly murdering people by like locking them. Everyone's very angry. Everyone's very mad about the COVID-0 policies. And then the moment that China opened up their, loosened their restrictions on COVID-0 and just like dumped it entirely, they were like, lol, everyone in China's getting COVID, you fucking idiots. Lol, we told you. We told you fucking dumbasses. Yo, can you imagine opening up your fucking economy? Get fucked, China. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? There's no winning. Unlike the top of the hour where there is a winner. The winner is subscribers who have subscribed for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime by connecting their Amazon Prime account to their Twitch accounts. Or the winners are those who get gifted subs if they're lucky. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Get fucked. Oh.
But Nikolai Belikov had other plans. Belikov presented Stein with their original contract. Mr. Stein, tell me honestly, what is this document called? He asked. An agreement, replied Stein. It's not an agreement, snapped Belikov. It's a set of some irresponsible phrases or other, under which rights are transferred to one party without compensation for the other. Belikov presented Stein with an amendment to the original contract. Elorg wanted their money, so the amendment detailed penalties for late payment. Belikov refused to negotiate until Stein signed it. Stein agreed to read over the amendment and return in a few days. It wasn't the friendliest meeting, but Stein was confident that once all of this was smoothed over, he would secure the handheld and arcade rights. Belikov's next meeting was with Kevin Maxwell, the son of Maxwell Corporation owner Robert Maxwell.
And brother of Ghislaine Maxwell. Why didn't he talk? Oh, this was 5 years ago. I guess like that makes sense. Okay, this is a video that's 5 years old. I get why, you know, they didn't mention that. Because if this video was made in, like, the last couple of years, not 5, there's no way he would have mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell in this. Like, for sure.
Robert Maxwell had connections to Russian bureaucrats, including General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. Mirrorsoft was confident that Kevin Maxwell would get the ball rolling in.
I wonder why Robert had those connections. I wonder, even in 5, highly relevant? No. At that point, come on, bro. 5 years ago? Come on, dog. We're talking 2018. No shot. Motherfuckers were, like, not talking about... Like, Ghislaine Maxwell in 2018 was a subject of... a subject of contention for people like myself, people like Brace. We knew about it, and we talked about Ghislaine Maxwell, but it was nowhere near in, like, broad cultural relevance until, like, Jeffrey Epstein's second fucking arrest and subsequent murder, suicide.
In their favor to secure the handheld rights. Belikov began the meeting by sliding the Famicom Tetris box across the table. "What is this?" he bluffed. Maxwell had no idea. He guessed it was a pirated copy of Tetris. "Only more reason for Mirrorsoft and Elorg to make a deal and get rid of these fakes," he said. Maxwell's ignorance of the situation was his downfall. For Belikov, it was confirmation that no one had the home console rights to Tetris. It would be foolish for Belikov to completely blow off Maxwell, even if he knew he was full of it. Their connections to Russia were relevant, and they had deep pockets. If it was indeed a pirated copy of Tetris, Belikov said, then Mirrorsoft should make a bid for the home console rights. He threw in another deal as well. Elorg would receive publishing rights to several Maxwell Corporation reference books and encyclopedias. In exchange, Mirrorsoft was given a right of first refusal for any new rights to Tetris. Maxwell was satisfied with the arrangement and returned home, thinking he had moved things in a positive direction for Mirrorsoft. In reality, he had compromised everything. Back in his hotel room, Robert Stein read over the amendment to his original contract with Elorg. It was basically the same, plus some extreme penalties for late payments. Getting the arcade rights was crucial, and in order to get them, Stein had to sign the amendment. He signed it and returned to Elorg the next day. With that out of the way, negotiations could continue. But Belikov claimed Elorg wasn't ready to sell the handheld rights. The arcade rights, however, were for sale. The cost? $150,000 for advanced royalty payments, with a 6-week deadline. It was a lot of money, but at least Stein would avoid any licensing issues for Tengen and Sega's arcade version of Tetris. Stein returned home feeling satisfied. But there was one crucial detail Stein missed in the new amendment. Belikov added a definition for a computer, which said that a computer consists of a processor, monitor, disk drive, keyboard, and operating system. Since the document was backdated, it effectively stripped away all the console rights Stein thought he owned. The large penalties for late payments had all been a distraction. The Russians at Elorg had played the game of capitalism and won. After his meetings, Belikov called Rogers to inform him that Kevin Maxwell and Mirrorsoft also wanted the handheld rights for Tetris. "I can't outbid Maxwell, but I can give you honesty and promise to pay you for each cartridge," said Rogers. Several days later, Rogers presented Elorg with a finalized contract and walked through every detail. It was official. Rogers and Nintendo secured the handheld rights to Tetris for the Game Boy. After signing the contract, Belikov presented Rogers with an offer. Make a bid on the home console rights to Tetris. Rogers knew Nintendo would be interested. Nintendo will outbid any competitor, Rogers said. Belikov asked for an offer in writing within 3 weeks, and with that, the meeting was adjourned. Rogers headed back to Japan. He had no time to spare. As soon as
That's
he
an
got back to
awesome image.
Japan, Hank Rogers phoned Minoru Arakawa at Nintendo of America with the news. Nintendo not only had the handheld rights to Tetris, but due to contractual issues, they had a chance to snag the home console rights as well. Arakawa relayed the message to Nintendo of America Vice President Howard Lincoln. Lincoln's eyes lit up. This deal could make millions for Nintendo. It would also be sweet revenge against Atari Games, a former Nintendo licensee that was now suing them for $100 million. The suit stemmed from Atari Games' frustration with Nintendo's licensee policies. They alleged antitrust violations and unfair competition. At the same time, Atari Games released a batch of unlicensed games under their subsidiary, Tengen. They were the very first unlicensed games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. One of Tengen's upcoming releases was the console version of Tetris. Taking Tengen's rights to Tetris would hurt, and Lincoln knew it. So they sent Rogers back to Moscow to make a formal offer. With him was a high-profile attorney who had previously worked in the Soviet Union and was fluent in Russian. Their offer to Elorg was incredible. $5 million. Guaranteed. As promised, Belikov contacted Mirrorsoft for right of first refusal. On March 15, 1989, he sent them a telex and gave them 1 day to respond with a counteroffer. When nothing came back, Elorg was ready to sign the deal with Nintendo. Due to the enormous amount of money at stake, a Nintendo employee had to sign the contract.
How much money is that in today's money? At least 5. 69, 420. Okay, you guys fucking suck, dude. Jesus Christ.
Lincoln and
I hate you
Arakawa
guys.
went themselves. They traveled in secret. Any chance of Atari Games finding out could jeopardize the agreement. They told Nintendo of America employees they were traveling to Japan and took off for Moscow. Negotiations continued when they arrived. Lincoln was sure Atari Games would come after them. He wanted a clause stating that the Russians would help defend their rights in any litigation. Lincoln also suggested royalty payments to Alexei Pajitnov for creating the game. Belikov found the suggestion inappropriate. Pajitnov had made the game on company time. It belonged to the state. Belikov suggested that Elorg could make the cartridges. They even inquired about making their own version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo declined. During the final stage of negotiations,
Nintendo would never allow that, dude. What do you mean? Nintendo would never allow that. Oh, Jesus. Nintendo about the DMCA, the USSR.
Jim McConaughey of Mirrorsoft finally returned the telex message to Elorg. As far as McConaughey was concerned, Mirrorsoft already had the console rights. Elorg must be mistaken. That was all Elorg needed to hear.
Nintendo has a stroke whenever you name your child Mario. Yeah. The entire Italian nation is about to get DMCA'd by Nintendo. Whenever there's a new Italian man that happens to become a plumber, they're like, if you ever wear the fucking overalls, dog, we are coming after you. We will fucking sue you. Nintendo licensed the NES to Hyundai. They called it the Hyundai Comboy. Wait, really? Dendy? They did make a Russian NES in the end? No, this is unofficial. Yeah, this is not real, dude. This is like... $5 million in 1989 equals 12 million, 12.3 million.
and on March 22, 1989, Nintendo and Elorg signed an agreement for the home console rights to Tetris. That same day, Belikov fired off another telex to Mirrorsoft and Robert Stein. The home console rights and handheld rights to Tetris were no longer available. They belonged to Nintendo. Robert Stein was dumbfounded. "I was so focused on getting what I wanted that I forgot about watching what they wanted," he said. He felt he was the victim of lying, backstabbing, and cheating. He accused Hank Rogers of colluding with the Russians on the amended contract. He also argued that Kevin Maxwell's meeting with Belikov had screwed everyone over. "He was burying me, burying us all," Stein said. At least there was a small consolation prize. Stein still had the home computer and arcade rights to Tetris. Kevin Maxwell was furious when he heard the news. "You are now in grave breach twice over of our agreements with you," he said in a reply telex to Elorg. He also threatened to get Soviet authorities involved. He wasn't bluffing. The Russian government questioned Nikolai Belikov. They searched his files. But
Incredible that fucking at that point they care more about some fucking Western spook than they do about their own internal guy.
Belikov stood his ground and assured Nintendo that they would honor their commitment. When Kevin Maxwell told his father the news about Tetris, he reportedly, quote, "went apeshit." Robert Maxwell took his anger all the way to Mikhail Gorbachev, now General Secretary of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev had more important matters at hand. His country was on the verge of collapse. "You should no longer worry about the Japanese company," Gorbachev told Maxwell. And with that, Mirrorsoft gave up the fight for Tetris. On March 31, 1989, President Hideyuki Nakajima of Atari Games received a surprising fax from Howard Lincoln of Nintendo of America. It was a cease and desist, ordering them to halt from any further manufacture, advertisement, promotion, offer for sale, or sale of Tetris for the NES or any other home system. The rights now belonged to Nintendo. "We knew we had those bastards by the balls," said Lincoln. On April 6, 1989, Nintendo sent out an official press release announcing plans to release Tetris that summer on the NES. The next day, Atari Games, via their subsidiary Tengen, sent a reply to Nintendo. "We are in receipt of your letter, and quite frankly, are quite confused. As Nintendo has known since last year, Tengen received all NES rights to the game Tetris in early 1988. These rights are, in Tengen's view, clear and unequivocal." But Atari Games was panicking. A week later, they filed a copyright application for their version of Tetris. On April 18th, they sued Nintendo for infringing on their licensing deal for Tetris. Almost everything was at stake. Atari Games anticipated Tetris to be a colossal hit that would break the shields of the Nintendo juggernaut. They assigned veteran programmer Ed Logg to program the NES version from the ground up. They spent a substantial amount of money on marketing. They took out a full-page ad in USA Today. They produced 300,000 copies of Tetris. They even held a huge launch party at the Russian Tea Room in New York City. On May 17, 1989, in the midst of their
None of these companies made the game. I don't understand. Yeah, well, that's what happens, dude. I mean, this is so perfectly applicable to like medicine patents, like distribution patents that pharmaceutical corporations constantly battle over. It's just like identical almost. It's like someone makes it because they're like, I want people to not die. And then the government releases it or sells it to someone. And then it's just like permanently stuck in a back and forth arbitration, back and forth. Over half the video had nothing to do with the guy who made it. No, none of the first 15 minutes, like 12 minutes is like, that's it. This is the point where it ends. You know what I mean? Like this, pretty much around here is where it ends. Like the guy who made it. He made it. He had fun. He wanted everyone to play it. And then the rest of it is just like back and forth, ruthless capitalists who are just fucking fighting each other. Tetris equals insulin? No, the reason why I always make that example is because it's infinitely worse that insulin is being duked over in a similar capacity when it's like life-saving medication, as I mentioned, okay?
Tetris is legal battles. Tengen released Tetris on the Nintendo Entertainment System. As expected, it flew off the shelves, selling 150,000 copies within weeks. Meanwhile, Howard Lincoln headed back to Moscow with a team of lawyers to prepare for the upcoming battle. They interviewed everyone they could: Alexei Pajitnov, Nikolai Belikov, and employees of Elorg and the Russian Academy of Sciences. They combed over every copy of the contracts between Robert Stein and Elorg. On June 15, 1989, Tengen and Nintendo opened their arguments in the U.S. District Court of Northern California. Presiding over the case was Judge Fern Smith, the same judge in charge of their other lawsuit dealing with the unlicensed Tengen games. Both Nintendo and Atari Games filed preliminary injunctions, which would prevent the other from selling their version of Tetris. Atari Games argued that their license for Mirrorsoft was valid, and that the Russians were double-dipping. Nintendo argued that the Russians never intended to sell anything other than the home computer rights to Mirrorsoft. But the smoking gun was the amended contract, which defined a home computer system. The NES definitely did not match that definition. On June 22nd, Judge Fern Smith reached her decision. She granted Nintendo a preliminary injunction, barring Atari Games from selling their version of Tetris.
Get fucked.
The trial was scheduled for later that year in November. It was a huge blow to Atari Games. By then, almost half of the initial 300,000 copies had been sold, leaving them with a warehouse full of games. When consumers heard the news, people rushed to snag their own copy. Many who borrowed the game from rental stores simply kept it, happily paying the replacement fee. On July 31st, 1989, Nintendo unleashed the Game Boy in North America, bundled with a copy of Tetris. Nintendo felt their case had clear and compelling evidence. They asked Judge Fern Smith for a summary judgment, which would end the trial before it began. To their surprise, Judge Fern Smith agreed. On November 13, 1989, she ruled that Nintendo owned the home console rights to Tetris. Atari Games announced they would appeal, but later decided against it. They destroyed all of their remaining warehoused copies of Tetris. That same month, Nintendo released their version of Tetris on the NES. It would go on to sell more than 5 million copies. The battle for the addictive Russian puzzle game was finally over. Hank Rogers' prediction that Tetris would make the Game Boy appeal to everyone was correct. By 2003, Nintendo sold over 118 million Game Boys. 35 million of them were bundled with Tetris. Although Nintendo emerged as the clear victors, just about everyone involved — Robert Stein, Spectrum Holobyte, Mirrorsoft, Hank Rogers, Elorg, and Atari Games — made money on Tetris. Everyone, that is, except its creator, Alexei Pajitnov. By 1989, he had collected nothing from Tetris and was still working at the Russian Academy of Sciences. He was married with 2 children. But in 1991, his fortunes changed. Hank Rogers was determined to help his friend.
The one guy whose life was not absolutely destroyed after the collapse of the USSR.
He helped Pajitnov and his family immigrate to the Seattle area, where Pajitnov founded his own software company. In 1995, the rights to Tetris expired, which gave Pajitnov the opportunity to finally cash in on his creation. By that point, Elorg was a private company, still under the direction of Nikolai Belikov. Elorg purchased 50% of the rights to Tetris. Rogers and Pajitnov partnered up and formed the Tetris Company, and purchased the other half. After 13 long years, Alexei Pajitnov finally received royalty payments for his game. To this day, the Tetris franchise has sold more than 170 million games,
Jesus fuck.
making it the 7th best-selling video game franchise of all time.
Dmitry Pavlovsky was unhappy that Tetris received more attention than the other games in the Computer Fun Fair package. In 1990, he immigrated to the United Kingdom. Vadim Gerasimov graduated from Moscow State University in 1992. He would eventually earn his PhD from MIT in 2003. Gerasimov never made any money from Tetris, but is proud of his work. He's now an engineer at Google. Vladimir Pokilko continued to study the psychological effects of Tetris. In 1989, he founded the software company Animatech. In 1991, Pokilko immigrated to the United States. In September 21st, 1998, Pokilko murdered his wife and his son before taking his own life. He was 44 years old. What the fuck? That was a dark turn. Jesus Christ. Robert Stein lost the PC rights to Tetris due to non-payment in 1990. In 1992, he lost the arcade rights due to non-payment. He estimates he made around $250,000 from Tetris. By the way, yeah, that was the guy who tried to stop his workers from playing Tetris. You know what I mean? That was the guy who tried to stop everybody from playing Tetris, you know? That's, you know, make what you will. Look, listen, all I'm saying is, turns out anti-gaming sentiment is maybe not the best, you know what I mean? Robert Maxwell continued to run the Maxwell Communications. His company's were more than $3 billion in debt. It was soon revealed that Maxwell was using employee pension funds to pay off debts. In November of 1991, his naked body was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. His death was ruled a heart attack combined with accidental drowning. He was murdered. Jim McConaughey went on to develop revolutionary flight simulator games. Microsoft acquired Acclaim Entertainment. Wait. He passed away in 2013 due to liver cancer. Bill Adams served as president of Spectrum Holobyte. Worked at Interplay. They would go on to publish several hits, including the Fallout series. He runs his own consulting company based out of Irvine, California. Gilman Louie would eventually become the CEO of Spectrum Holobyte before leaving in 1993. In 1999, he co-founded Incutel. There's no way. Okay, come on, dog. You can't just say Incutel, a venture capital firm that invests in companies providing technology to intelligence agencies. Literally CIA. It's CIA's venture capital arm. Come on. And so was Robert Maxwell. There's like two international feds involved in this. Hideyuki Nakajima led Atari Games in their antitrust lawsuit against Nintendo. They would eventually lose the case, but their battle triggered the FTC to investigate Nintendo. In 1994, Time Warner folded Atari Games and Tengen into Time Warner Interactive. Passed away due to lung cancer. Yamauchi would serve as the president of Nintendo until retiring in 2002. In 1992, he purchased a majority ownership in the Seattle Mariners. He never attended a single game. Miyamoto still works at Nintendo. He's considered one of the greatest video game designers of all time. He's responsible for several popular franchises, including The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario. Kevin Maxwell and his brother Ian Maxwell took over the Maxwell Corporation after their father's death. The company filed for bankruptcy in 1992. Maxwell later went on trial for fraud, but was acquitted. He filed for the largest personal bankruptcy in UK history, claiming to be over £400 million in debt. Arakawa served as president of Nintendo until his retirement in January 2002. He currently resides in Hawaii. Chairman of Nintendo America in 1994-99. Appointed CEO of Seattle Mariners baseball team. He was instrumental in bringing over the Japanese superstar Ichiro Suzuki. However, the team never saw major success. In 2016, Nintendo sold their majority ownership of the Mariners. Lincoln resigned as CEO. Nikolai Belikov ran Elorg as a private company after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1995, he sold half the rights to Tetris to the Tetris company. In 2005, he sold his half of the Tetris shares back to the Tetris company for $15 million. Hank Rogers formed Blue Planet Software in 1996. His daughter serves as CEO and president. In 2007, Rogers formed Blue Planet Foundation with a mission to end the use of carbon-based fuel. I don't think Hank Rogers is that bad of a guy. Alexei Pajitnov, including Hexic, none would ever match success at Tetris. He left Microsoft in 2005. He currently resides in the Seattle area where he enjoys his free time and works on his own projects. He still collects royalties from Tetris. Good for him. Wow. This was a great video, dude. Holy shit, gaming historian. What a fucking epic video.